Welcome to The Voice of Retail. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc. This podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. On this special episode, I'm thrilled to be sharing an excerpt from a recent episode of my popular Remarkable Retail podcast, where my podcast partner and best-selling author Steve Dennis and I welcome Rachel Bentley and Carly Nance, the co-founders of Dallas-based The Citizenry, the fast-growing, thoughtfully designed, ethically crafted home furnishing company. We dig into the inspiration for the brand, the white space they seek to address, and how social impact is at the center of what they stand for. We also delve into the challenges of ethically sourcing products from all over the world, discover how they make their unique leadership partnership work, and explore the role of customer-based analytics in growing their brand. Lastly, we get a peek into their strategic growth roadmap.
I do think there are rhythms to that, right? Like the year and a half period that we are in right now, post Series B, is really a building period for us. And we may not be chasing sales at the same level because we're laying some of the infrastructure and some of the foundational building blocks within our team to be able to handle that growth.
Well, Michael and I are excited to welcome Rachel and Carly, the founders of The Citizenry, to our podcast. Fellow Dallasites, maybe not originally from Dallas, but anyway, we're not too far away from each other. But welcome to the podcast. How are you guys today?
We're great. Steve, thank you so much for having us.
Excited to be here.
Well, thanks. We've actually been chasing you for a little while, but you were busy building your business and raising some money and things like that, which we'll get to in a minute. But what we'd like to do when we start off the podcast is just have each of you share a little bit about your background, your professional journey, and kind of how you guys came together to found a company together. So, Carly, would you mind kicking off on that?
Sure. So my background, I am a brand strategist by trade. I got my master's in integrated marketing right out of undergrad, where I met Rachel, which we can talk about a little bit later, and then went on to have a career at ad agencies in New York, helping some of the biggest brands in the world endear themselves to consumers, like Oreo, Fisher-Price, Jamaica Tourism Board. That was a fun one. But I was getting to the stage in my career where I wanted to put my money where my mouth was, go build a brand that shaped consumer culture for the better, and a brand that was a combination of a number of my personal passions for travel, design, doing something good in the world. And it was conversations around those passions that led Rachel and I back together.
This is Rachel, and I started my career on finance. I did my undergraduate in accounting, my master's in finance, and then jumped into the world of strategy consulting at Bain & Company, working with companies on wide variety of issues, but then ultimately ended up focusing on private equity backed companies within the Bain practice, and was actually spending a decent amount of time working in global supply chains in Asia. And I think that experience really began to give me the insight into some of the biggest issues that are facing our world today around both human rights and the environment, and just how significantly global supply chains were impacting those things and how closely they were tied to the global financial markets. And so those two things began to get me thinking more seriously about how I was going to personally use my skills and my time to try to make a positive impact with what I was doing professionally.
Tell us about the Citizenry. I'm on the website. I've actually been in the store. I wandered in years ago, probably just right when you first opened. Beautiful store, and I love the assortment. I was looking at the Hinoki wood from Japan. I think I got a few things on my wish list. Tell me about the inspiration and the gap you're looking to fill in the marketplace. Not like furniture isn't a crowded category, and how are you positioning the brand to win and to stand out?
Sure, Michael, that's a great question. So years ago, Rachel and I had just moved from New York and were furnishing a home, more than just a small studio space for the first time. And the two of us just found the home decor shopping experience, to your point, a little cluttered, a little uninspiring, and there was just a lot of mass-produced dime a dozen. You saw the same types of things in the market. And what we really saw, because we both come from some consumer insight background, is that consumers were really wanting more premium artisanal things, particularly the millennial consumer, which we are. And so we saw that demand shift categories like food with the farm to table movement and fashion with the rise of some independent designers. And we thought it was only a matter of time before this desire for more premium, artisanal, interesting things from around the world would hit the home decor market. And so when you're thinking about the home decor market at the time, people could either find those things on Etsy, scouring around, or really high-end boutiques. And we saw this massive opportunity for a brand in the middle that, made these really beautiful, artisanal, well-crafted things from around the world more accessible to all, and did so in a way that was tailored to our generation's style, standards, and values. So creating a supply chain that did good in the world, and Rachel can talk about that a little bit more, but also a brand that just made the experience more inspiring, something like the next best thing to traveling the world and meeting these makers and bringing that to life online.
Yeah, it's wonderful product. Rachel, let's pick up on that. So social responsibility clearly at the core of everything you do. When I hear things about sourcing around the world, everyone now knows these words, supply chain, compared to a couple of years ago where it was kind of an esoteric function. Talk about how it's almost like a round peg in a square hole some days is how you put these two words in the same place, a efficient supply chain that allows you to, put the right margin, get the right product, and, sustainability. And is it sustainable? Like how do you do those two things at the same time?
It's a tremendous challenge, and you are going to give up something to get something else. But I think the experience that I had working in global supply chains and for massive companies prior was that I really began to realize that most of the products we consume today require tremendous amounts of human labor at very low cost. And that's why people have sourced internationally and brought those products to the U.S. for years. And I think when you begin to see those conditions and challenges that exist across supply chains today, begin to realize just the impact that we were having. And so in order to create a more sustainable supply chain, I think we have to talk about what is fairly paid from a human standpoint. And then also you have to think about sustainability in terms of the environment. And I think companies often lean to address the environmental one because it is, I think, a little bit easier and maybe a little bit more cost effective. But you hear very few people talk about what it means to have fair wages, have fairly paid labor, and what is, considered a sustainable wage. And so it's something that has been foundational to our model from the beginning, is that we work with artisans around the world to create these beautifully crafted home goods. And we are working with really high quality materials and really skilled craftsmen in order to do that. And we are also doing our best to ensure that they are making well above minimum wage. Our average is between 2.5 and 3 times minimum wage, and that we're really pushing into that living wage, and that everything we are doing is abiding by World Fair Trade principles. And I think the only way that is possible is for it to be a core foundational principle of your business and of your business model. And that as you continue, you remain true to that. And then you make trade-offs in other parts of your business in terms of, we can't pay maybe the highest market rates in terms of our team salaries here, or maybe you can't make the investment into really beautiful brand awareness marketing, like things like that. You're going to make some trade-offs when you give up certain margin dollars. But for us, I think that trade-off in terms of how the products are made is really important.
I just want to follow that thread for a little bit. Talk about the tradecraft of finding those suppliers, because in any world, not just the COVID era, finding great suppliers, great vendors, and sourcing that and working with them, even taking away all your great strategies around sustainability and fair trade is not easy. How do you guys go about finding those diamonds? Not even diamonds in the rough, but those artisanal products that make sense for you? Because then you got to filter that down too. It's got to be the right product, the right place, delivered at the right time, at the right volume. Talk about that a little bit.
It's a great question. Everything that we do at the Citizenry has been designed and developed for the Citizenry. We're not just going out and finding a product and then bringing it to market. So I think that's an important distinction. But then additionally, we're looking for really high potential partners that maybe don't have the experience of exporting their product, but are doing really beautiful things or really beautiful work within their home country. And we are bringing an additional skill set to them to help them around either capacity building in terms of their production, getting ready to export, managing logistics. I think we have had to take the approach of being much more flexible, much more adaptable, and much more involved in the building process of our artisan partner groups. I don't think there are many of our partners to date that we walked into and they were ready to go. It has been a building process, just as we have been building and scaling our own business. We've been building and scaling these artisan cooperatives around the world.
And I think, Rachel, that's an important distinction for how we started, is that, Michael, to your point, these products didn't exist at the right price and the right time and the right design. And so what we do is we go find partners, we go find people with incredible capabilities. And as Rachel said, we work with them versus finding products around the world. And I think that's why we chose the name The Citizenry in the beginning, because we're about a collective of people working together to create and bring these products to market, not just us going sourcing and putting it on a website, because that already existed.
Well, it's really amazing. I realize you guys are still relatively early in the whole process here, but I was reflecting in preparation for this interview about when I first met you guys. I think it was close to 7 years ago when you were first raising money, and we were introduced by a mutual acquaintance who asked me, or I guess you were interested in getting perhaps some advice. I don't know if my advice was very useful, but I do remember being struck by how well thought out and comprehensive and analytically based, I guess, for lack of a better term, your pitch deck was, and where the state of your beta website was at that point. And it was surprising, not to get too in the weeds, but I've certainly seen a lot of pitch decks over the years, and many of them are pretty light on detail and pretty high on aspiration, I guess I'll say. But I'm just sort of curious, what was your, you talked a little bit about the inspiration of the brand, but as you approached deciding what this business was going to look like and how you were going to raise money and build it, what was the approach you took? Because it did seem like you had a really unique angle on this compared to at least most of what I'd seen.
You're very kind. I appreciate it. I do think what you were seeing at the point that we met, probably 1.5 to 2 years into our journey from when Carly and I had begun exploring the idea of the Citizenry, was the result of a lot of research and a lot of careful modeling and thinking. But Carly and I both come from a consumer insights background where we need to understand who the customer is, what they're motivated by, what their purchase criteria are. And we spent almost a year after beginning to talk about the Citizenry doing that level of primary research and identifying those sorts of things, and then building out the hypothesis of what that brand and what that company could look like. And then we went and built a beta with our own money before we ever went out to really raise any sort of capital. And so we have approached everything about building the Citizenry from a very analytical, even conservative perspective, just as a reflection almost of who Carly and I are. Carly, anything you would add to that?
No, I was just reflecting as you were talking. Rachel and I have really different skill sets and bring different things to the table. But where we overlap and almost our love language, like how we speak to each other, is data and strategy. And so, I'm a more creative person, but I'm driven by data and strategy. And she's comes from that background, but then has a love for beautiful things and creating experiences that break through in the market. So in many ways, it's the way the two of us align, because our brains think so differently about everything else. But when it comes to consumer insights, where the market opportunity is and how we go after it, that's where we can get aligned really quickly. So I think it just manifested in our deck. that way 7 years ago early on, and it has just continued to be the guiding light and principles between the organization.
Very fair.
Well, that reminds me of a question I was going to ask. I'm kind of curious. Actually, a business that I founded a long, long time ago was the product of a partnership where I think we had very different skill sets, but we did overlap in some important ways. How does that work? Being partners and sharing responsibility, just for other people that may be thinking about their leadership structure or maybe working better with their business partner. What are some of the secrets to that over time?
Sure. I was going to say very clear camps and very deep respect with one another in terms of decision making across those camps. But ultimately, the organization is divided clearly on which one of us is responsible and has kind of the final say in any area. So the way we break out the business is that, everything that you see, not to make it too simple, but falls under my camp. So the brand, the marketing, the site, the product design, and everything that makes the business work and run and make money falls under Rachel's camp, from operations, finance, strategy, supply chain, legal, accounting, all the things. I have no idea how she does all of them. But it's never been a confusion on who makes the final decision about anything because of that. And then you have to still have really deep respect and the ability to collaborate across the things, because we're also spread really thin, and a lot of things that, our expertise is only deep in a few areas. And so we also have to work with one another because we always make each other's thinking a little bit better, I guess, in each of those camps. Rach, would you add anything there?
I think the biggest driver for us, both in terms of why the Citizenry has been able to be as successful as it has been and why we are still here today leading it, is that at its core, we always wanted to work together and learn from each other. And that we always felt like if you put the two of us in a room, we would learn something from the other, and that the end result of what we were creating would be better. And I think it's remarkable to sit here and look back and think that that has been true over an 8-year period without any real major ups and downs in that point. But it's just been a real sense of, I think, steadiness and constancy for both each other and then also, I think, the business more broadly.
We've also said that one of our greatest goals is to make it out on the other end still with a deep friendship, and we maintain that even through the challenging times. And I think it has to be a goal and a priority to both of you, or many of you, if you're going to go into something like this, to say, and you want to work together for 8 years, that you're going to make it out on the other side, because it's not easy and it's a rocky road for sure.
Rachel, let me pick up on the discussion around not just building the company, but growing the company. So talk about the work you've been doing to grow the company and putting the capital that you raised to work. Where do you start? How do you approach that from, you got a blank sheet of paper and you have $1 in front of you, and how do you start prioritizing and building for the future with the resources at hand?
For us, I think it's been very clear. We started the Citizenry largely focused on decor items that were very statement making within your own home, but on the soft goods side, right? The rugs, the pillows, the blankets. And as we are building the business, we are becoming much more of that whole home player that you can shop any part of your home for. So not only can you buy the rug and the pillow for us that really defines your aesthetic and defines your style, but you can buy the best linen bedding in the world, and you can buy the softest, most durable waffle towels from Japan. And we're thinking more broadly as we build out this business, and that is even taking us into hard goods and furniture, where you doing the nightstands and the sofas and the beds and that world as well. So I think it's really building the business both from a product standpoint into that whole home brand, but then also becoming more and more of an omni-channel brand, right? We have one retail store in New York. It's been incredibly successful for us, continuing to build out both our retail strategy, but then also just our channel strategy more broadly overall.
How do you think about the cadence of that growth? In other words, we've used the word sustainable. Let's use it in a different context. The growth that is sustainable, not too fast, not too slow, at the right pace. Like, do you have a framework in mind that you think about how and where and how fast we can go based on what you think will build a company to last?
I do think there are rhythms to that, right? Like the year and a half period that we are in right now, post Series B, is really a building period for us. And we may not be chasing sales at the same level because we're laying some of the infrastructure and some of the foundational building blocks within our team to be able to handle that growth. And so I think there are really, for lack of a better word, rhythms to how a business grows and scales. And then you hit tipping points where you need to go back and rethink your strategy or invest more deeply behind the scenes. And then points in which you're really leaning in and growing as much as you possibly can from an external perspective.
So it seems, and I know we've had discussions on and off about this over the years, because like one of my little side projects seems to be getting into, which is, incredibly fascinating, customer acquisition costs, lifetime value, all those kinds of things. But you seem to have resisted the temptation to do what a lot of the other digitally native vertical brands, and I don't know if you'd like to be thought of in that respect, but in any event, many of them have done sort of this moonshot approach to building a brand where they've raised a ton of money, thrown a lot of it at branding and digital marketing and so forth, and then have kind of woken up with a hangover. Can you just talk a little bit about how you've thought about the marketing side of it in particular, and how maybe that analytic-based approach has caused you to take a different approach? I don't know, Carly or Rachel, whether you want to take that one on.
I think we've always been more data-driven, and that's clear in how we've answered some of these questions, but we've always built the business around a lifetime value play. And it was never about a single product or a single category, because we knew that would just be, to your point, chasing an acquisition and having a hangover. But building the business from the ground up and thinking about CAC to, LTV ratios and how much we could spend at different times based on where we are there, and just thinking about our metrics more holistically in that sense.
This has been basically a masterclass of entrepreneurship and growth. So it's really been a treat to listen. I have a funny question given the state of the business growth. What's next? I mean, it seems like lots is happening. Would I see perhaps at some point be able to buy your product from here in Canada? Do you envision wholesale as part of the formula? How are you thinking about what comes next?
Lots of exciting things. I think for us, first and foremost, it's going to be about continuing to build out the products that we offer. And then second, to really be focused on building out our retail presence. So those are the next two big things, but that's a 3 to 5 year strategy. So it won't happen overnight, but we're getting there.
Yeah, fantastic.
We're really on the path to being this go-to destination for modern global citizens. And we know what that means as a whole home offering and an omni-channel brand. And so we have, Rachel alluded to it. We're building out furniture in all areas of the home and making plans for additional channels and how the brand manifests there to grow into that broader vision.
And then I think beyond that, there is so much that we're going to be rolling out in the next couple of years in terms of setting new standards for sustainability and for fair trade. And that's, I think, a really exciting spot for Carly and I to get to be focused on as well.
That's a good point.
Well, this has been wonderful. And when Steve introduced the brand to me and he said you were truly remarkable, and I have to echo that after listening to both the business strategy and just the vision, the merchandising vision behind it. So, on behalf of Steve, thanks so much for joining us on Remarkable Retail. It's been a real treat to listen to get a peek inside how you think about building business and what you see coming out from the other side of the journey. So thanks again, Rachel and Carly, for making the time to speak with Steve and I.
Of course, Michael, Steve, thank you very much for having us.
It's been fun.
If you like what you heard, please follow us on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform so you can catch up with all our great interviews and insights, and new episodes will show up each and every week. Sure to check out our YouTube channel, and last but not least, tell your friends and colleagues in the retail industry all about us.
And I'm Steve Dennis, author of the best-selling book, Remarkable Retail, How to Win and Keep Customers in the Age of Disruption. You can learn more about me my consulting and keynote speaking at stephenpdennis.com.
And I'm Michael LeBlanc, producer and co-host of the Conversations with Commerce Next podcast, the Voice of Retail podcast, keynote speaker, and host of the all-new Last Request Barbecue Cooking Show on YouTube. And you can learn even more about me on LinkedIn or meleblanc.co. Have a safe week, everyone. Thanks for tuning into this special episode of The Voice of Retail. If you haven't already, be sure and click and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so new episodes will land automatically twice a week. And check out my other retail industry media properties, the Remarkable Retail Podcast, Conversations with Commerce Next podcast, and the Food Professor podcast with Dr. Sylvain Charlebois. Last but not least, if you're into barbecue, check out my all-new YouTube barbecue show, Last Request Barbecue, with new episodes each and every week. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc, president of M.E. LeBlanc Company and Maven Media. And if you're looking for more content or want to chat, follow me on LinkedIn or visit my website at meleblanc.co. Have a safe week, everyone.